told him I'd hang out in the 5,000.
Good evening, everyone. I will go ahead and call our work session to order. And Superintendent Degner, did you want to say anything before we turn it over to our presenters tonight?
Just a couple notes. I'd like to welcome Allers and PFM here, and I'll let them introduce themselves here shortly. This is a follow-up to some of the introductory information we provided to you last week. Was it just last week? Yeah, last Tuesday. We also attached a memo that serves as a follow-up to a couple of the questions that we had, and then their presentation got loaded here this afternoon. And so there's a lot of slides, but they're going to do a great job of walking us through it. And then, of course, we'll be ready to answer any of your questions. But with that, I'll turn it over to Suzanne, Emily, or Beth, whoever wants to kick it off.
My name's Beth Grove. I've been here before. Nice to see you again. From Allers Law Firm. I'm just doing the flipping of the Suzanne slide. She did all the hard work.
And hi everybody, Emily Colby, also with Allers. I'm just next to Suzanne. She's just
And again, Suzanne Gerlach from PFM Financial Advisors, the municipal advisor for the district, and have been working on your account since I started at PFM back in 2006. So I'm glad to be here tonight. I have a lot of information prepared, and so I wanted to just kind of give an overview of the funds that I reviewed, a summary of some thoughts on each fund, and then get into the discussion of the warrants and the issuance process and the timeline that we're proposing. So that sounds good. We'll just go ahead and get started. Beth, if you want to pull up the presentation.
Kim, I need to be closer.
It's on the tab.
Yeah, I have it up here.
Very well. Can you pull your mic a little bit closer?
So Kim, it's up here.
It's not showing on the screen.
It's not showing
Yeah.
on the screen.
That might be helpful. There we go.
There we go.
Well, thank you.
Okay. All right, if we want to flip to the agenda, this will be a quick summary of the topics we're going to cover tonight. I'm going to go through what PFM reviewed and what a summary of our analysis, the things we looked at, the things we didn't. I'm going to go through specifically the debt service fund, the PPEL fund, the SAVE fund, and the general fund tonight, and just give sort of a summary of my fiscal analysis of each, some considerations in each fund. Then we're going to talk about PFM's recommendation for the issuance of taxable general fund tax anticipation warrants. We're going to go through the issuance process together and the proposed timeline. I've also provided a summary of the interfund loans that are going to be discussed in the presentation. I thought it might be helpful to have a one-stop shop to understand in each fund the to's and the froms, to keep track of some of the things going on, and then just some closing comments, some observations and considerations. Allers weighed in on those as well, and so we work very collaboratively, so I invite Emily and Beth to chime in if there's anything along the way, and please feel free to stop me with questions along the way. If there's acronyms I'm using, I'm very guilty of using acronyms that maybe everybody in the room doesn't understand or need to be clarified, or if there's anything that isn't clear along the way, please feel free to let me know. So on slide number 4, PFM, I would say, did a thorough review of the funds that are listed. We looked at the general fund, the capital funds, which I would include to be the debt service fund, the SAVE fund, and the PPEL fund. We started, obviously I have history going all the way back to 2006, but this review started with the 23 audit that was recently released. We looked at internal unaudited financial information, including the comprehensive annual report, the certified annual report for fiscal 24, fiscal 25, looked at year-to-date versus the budget, where we are for fiscal 26, and have had some preliminary discussions with staff on what the 27 budget is shaping up to look like in these funds. And again, had discussions with staff. We've had somewhat weekly check-ins, kind of progress reports. They've been very gracious to answer my questions, so thank you to district staff for taking the time to get me the information I need, and to talk about the questions that I had along the way as I did my analysis. Also looked at internal documents for revenues and expenditures, and reviewed the internal cash flow projections that district staff had provided. On Page 5, I would say that PFM takes a very conservative approach to the district's finances. So what I'm showing you today, I would consider to be worst case. I think it's more prudent to plan for the worst case and then have things come in better than to maybe overshoot and then come in worse. I just think that in my 20 years experience of doing this, that just leads to better advice and better results for the district and its stakeholders overall. So all of my cash flows, I did prepare independent versions of cash flows. We have some models internally that we maintain for the district. And then the general fund model was created just for this analysis. I created an annual general fund model as well as a monthly general fund model to check cash flows for fiscal year end, which is the most important date in the general fund because that's what gets stamped in your audit, and then to check monthly cash flows for liquidity and different things over time. I just can't overstate enough that all of my analysis is based on a certain set of assumptions, right? So I'm relying on, the 23 audit, 24, fiscal 24 and fiscal 25, those fund reconciliations are still in process. I think everybody's aware of that. Those audit reviews are still in process. So the most significant assumption that could impact all of this analysis is what really was the July 1st, 2025 cash balances in all of these funds. We're making some assumptions. We're assuming that the information in here is correct, but as the district continues to work through fiscal 24 and fiscal 25, want to just put a big asterisk. We reserve the right to update these analyses as new information would become available. I think that there has been some concern that perhaps there might be some of the cash balances may be overstated, specifically in the general fund, but by how much we just don't know until we get through the reconciliation process. So, and again, I think being conservative will help us mitigate that if that were to be the case. And so I'll do my best as we go through the presentation to highlight the assumptions that are driving our analysis in each different fund, because there are different key factors that will change our analysis in each of the funds that we're going to review. So any questions so far? Okay. All right, seeing none, we'll start with the debt service fiscal analysis, the debt service fund. The first thing I want to talk about is the interfund loan from debt service to PPEL. In July of 2025 through February of 26, property tax receipts that were originally levied for the purposes of paying debt service in the debt service fund in the amount of $7,409,000 were placed in the PPEL fund and used for PPEL purposes. PPEL did pay the December 1st, 2025 interest due on GO bonds in the amount of $2,470,000. And that means PPEL still owes the debt service fund $4,939,604 to be exact, which must be repaid, I would say, as soon as possible, no later than May 15th, May 22nd, whenever we can get the money into the debt service fund so that June 1st, 2026 principal and interest payments can be paid out of the debt service fund.
So the district pays interest semi-annually, December 1st and just June 1st, and then principal annually on June 1st, which is why that June 1st payment is much larger than the December payment.
Yeah. And without those funds, debt service would not have sufficient money available to pay the debt service. So that's why I wanted to highlight this as something that really needs to happen before UMB Bank would pull those funds prior to the June 1st payments to DTC, to your bondholders. DTC is who distributes the money to the bondholders. And so, one of the things that I've noted in each of these funds, the district currently puts the cash from the debt service fund, the PPEL fund, and the SAFE fund into one bank account. So one thought I had was if it's helpful to either separate those into separate bank accounts or review how it's being accounted for internally, just so that, it doesn't get mistaken that tax receipts are not just tax receipts. Taxes levied for debt service should be used for debt service. Taxes levied for the PPEL fund should be used in the PPEL fund. And so creating separate bank accounts could be a solution that I've offered up on the bottom of that slide. And so just a little bit of information. I don't need to read through all of this, but I just wanted to give everybody on the board and the community sort of a high-level perspective on the revenue, the expenses, cash balances, and then the different things that are impacting each of the different funds. And so again, I don't need to read all of these, but in debt service, your taxable valuations have been growing very strong, 2.7% growth for the current fiscal year and 4.09% growth in your taxable valuations in the debt service fund, which is, how the taxes are levied based on taxable valuation. Your tax rate has actually been declining. As you grow the taxable valuations, your debt service levy tax rate is declining. And so that's good news. And then property tax revenue obviously is what is levied each year to pay for the principal and interest. The total GO bonds, there's 3 series of GO bonds currently outstanding, and total debt service is around $13.4 million per year. The debt service fund at the end of 26, PFM estimates will have around $374,000 of cash. On the next slide, one thing I did want to provide was sort of PFM's recommendation for what each fund should have as an ending cash balance. I think giving you an idea of what's appropriate at the end of the fiscal year would be helpful. And so a debt service fund is what's called a bona fide fund. And a bona fide fund means your revenues should equal your expenses and net zero each year. It's very hard to get to zero in an actual debt service fund, but the amount levied should equal the amount of expenses. There are going to be miscellaneous revenues, interest earned on cash balances. The commercial industrial backfill doesn't usually go into the budget. That was creating cash balances historically. But really, there is no minimum required balance in a debt service fund because you make all of your payments on June 1st. Technically, zero is a reasonable balance in the debt service fund. If we wanted to get fancy, a sinking fund would have 1/6 and 1/12 of the next interest payment and 1/12 of the next principal payment in for 1 month balance, right? And so, but you can't levy to build cash balance in a debt service fund. So. And I will also say any cash balance that is in the debt service fund can only be used for debt service. It is a restricted fund and it is not allowed to be transferred out for other purposes. And so the last thing that I wanted to talk about, if we can go to slide number 10, each fund I wanted to talk about future capacity, right? What's the capacity for activity or funding capital in each of these funds going forward? And so, the current, PFM estimates the FY27 debt service levy will be $1.61. You are authorized to levy up to $2.70, so there is capacity within the current levy limit should the district seek to go to a GO bond vote. But I wanted to talk about, before we could talk about going to the market, we need to work on reinstating the district's credit rating. Moody's Investor Service withdrew the district's credit rating for lack of information a few years ago. And in order to get to the table to go through a rating review, there would need to be audited financial statements issued within 12 months of the end of the most recent fiscal year. And so I verified that with the Moody's folks this summer with them directly. And so, I think it's safe to say that, it's not like you get your old rating back. You would be going to the table for a new rating review, and it would be based on all the information they're getting provided today. So, PFM couldn't guarantee the outcome of that, but I don't think we should assume we're just automatically going to get our old rating back. That's just simply not how ratings work. But I do think the district would receive an investment grade rating, assuming that we have all the audits caught up to date and we have done all the things we need to do.
Thank you for that. I just have one question because I'm not familiar with this process. How common is it for a credit rating to be withdrawn like that?
So there were, I want to say, 100 different credits on the list that had ratings withdrawn. I want to say there were maybe 10 in the state of Iowa. So you weren't alone. It was just a mass email that had an Excel file attached that said these are withdrawn for lack of information. It's not very common in school districts, I'll say, because usually, you have requirements on when your audits are needing to be done, but it's not completely uncommon.
So that was likely related to our audit
Yes.
issues?
Yes.
Okay.
Because there was not a timely audit, they could not provide a rating comment. And so and Moody's has rules that say if they have not reviewed your rating within 12 to 18 months, they have to withdraw the rating.
What is an investment grade rating? Or what is
Okay.
there anything above that, and is there anything below that?
Okay, so Moody's starts at AAA, and then it goes to double A, so there's AA1, AA2, AA3, and then we drop to the A category, A1, A2, A3, and then we drop to BAA1. BAA1 is the bottom before you get below investment grade. We don't want to talk about anything below BAA1. Historically, back in 2000, up until 2015, when we did the original referendum, the district was AAA. And then once voters approved the larger referendum, gosh, I don't remember how much it was, 100 and some million back in 2015-ish. When we were working on that capital plan, the district got downgraded to AA1. And then most recently, we knew that was going to happen because we were leveraging debt, right? And it was the low debt burden that had propped Iowa City up to be AAA. And then back in, I want to say, we had gotten 2 of the 3 GO bonds done before we knew the downgrade was coming, and then we were at AA2. So AA2 was the most recent rating that the district received before it was withdrawn back in, I would say it was in 20, I don't remember now,
It was 2020 or 2023?
23 maybe.
23.
Yeah,
When we
2023.
issued the sales tax
Yeah.
bond.
Yeah.
Most school districts in Iowa are not AAA rated.
No,
You
there
were
are
one of
none.
the only AAA rated, if not the only AAA rated school district
Yeah,
in
there
the
are.
state of Iowa.
There are no AAA rated school districts today. Yeah, good questions.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then the next slide is a copy of the model that PFM maintains for the debt service fund. This shows just the taxable valuation, the tax rate across from left to right, and then the total revenues, and then there's your 3 series of bonds. I will say that the last series, the 2020 bonds, will mature in 2039, but there is capacity within the tax rate as the district continues to grow its taxable valuations. The tax rate will continue to drop. You'll be below $1 before the bonds mature. So there is a capacity here if you were to seek a new GO bond in the future based on the current tax rate.
Just so you know, you could only go for a GO bond election in November of each year. That's the way the law is now. And your audit schedule does not have you getting your audits caught up until fiscal year 28, which would be the November 27 election, assuming you could get an investment grade rating.
Any questions on the debt service fund before we move on to PPEL? Okay, Beth, if you want to click to slide 12, please. Thank you. And so PPEL fund is also funded by property taxes. And so it's the same taxable valuations in debt service and PPEL. They include, PPEL and debt service are both protected levies, which means that TIF is not taken out of the taxable valuations. And so PPEL revenues are roughly $13.4 million per year and will grow as the taxable valuations grow. And there's no debt in the PPEL funds, and there's also a very strong cash balance in the PPEL funds. Assuming our July 1st, 2025 cash balance was correct, PFM estimates June 30th of 26 you'll end the year with around $11.4 million in the PPEL fund. And then growing that based on what is in the 27 budget, based on what we know today. There will be a surplus at the end of fiscal 27, and PFM currently estimates a ending cash balance of around $15.6 million. PPEL is going to be the fund that is available to fund capital projects in the next few years. If we want to go to the next slide, PPEL is also going to be the fund that is going to have to help out SAVE a little bit. And we'll talk about SAVE next, but SAVE is struggling much more than your PPEL fund is. And so PPEL is going to be sort of your capital piggy bank, and it's also going to be the place that we need to keep cash. As tempting as it is probably to want to spend some of that cash, it's really important that we reserve as much of the cash balance from PPEL as possible because SAVE might need to borrow from it. And that's going to be sort of, and it's a property tax fund, right? So you have to have some cash balance at the end of the fiscal year to pay for summer improvements and different things that you might be doing that are gonna be compressed and be due early in the year before you get that fall property tax payment. So that's why cash balance management is gonna be really important in any property tax related fund. The timing of things when you're doing improvements, when the students are out of the buildings and stuff. And so again, I made a note here about considering separate accounts, PEPEL, Save, and debt service were all in the same fund. The bank account, it's all in the same bank account, I should say. And when I think about the recommended minimum cash balance for PEPEL, I'm being very conservative by saying $10 million. And I would say if we can hold that for the next 3 to 5 years, I think even the next 2 to 3, I would say is essential. The next 2 is really essential as we get through the next 2 fiscal years, because we're going to be working through all of those audit reconciliations. We're going to have more information. We're going to get caught up. And this is the place where we have some cash to work with in the meantime. And so we don't want to spend it too quickly if we can hold it. And so $10 million is my minimum recommendation in the PEPEL. That will allow PEPEL to cover the technology costs from Save. We'll get to that in a second, but Save is not going to be able to afford its technology costs over the next 2 years that it would normally fund. And so PEPEL is going to have to cover roughly $3.5 million in technology costs that come out early in the fiscal year. So again, that cash balance is going to be essential. Those costs may come out before you get that October payment. And then also, again, to cash flow any summer capital that might be compressed between July 1st and September invoice dates before we get an October property tax payment. So that might feel conservative, it might feel a little restrictive, but it really will be helpful if we can reserve that cash over the next couple years, especially when we find out more information.
Historically, what have we typically had for cash reserve in our PEPEL fund? Or if you're getting to if this is a question that you're planning on answering later on.
The slide after is the cash flow. So if you want to flip to the cash flow, Beth, we can look at that and then we'll go back to future capacity. It's hard to see. I know the numbers are really small. 12 million, 11.9, 15.3, 9.7, and I'm estimating 11.4 at the end of 26. So we've been right there. Each year. So it's not something higher or extremely a lot higher than what you've had historically. And again, timing, accounts payable, all the things would fall into that. But it's right in line with what you've done historically. If we can go back, that was a good question.
Thank you.
Yep. Future capacity on slide 14. One more for you. There you go. And so there is no PEPEL. So PEPEL is considered a GO. So from Moody's perspective, a GO capital loan note paid by PEPEL is the same thing as a GO bond paid for by debt service. They don't make a distinction between the two in their methodology, so it would be rated as a GO bond. But there is no GO capital loan notes. There's no debt being paid for in PEPEL. Those bonds matured last fiscal year. So PEPEL could be an option if you needed to leverage something. It's voted for a 10-year period. The current vote, I think, goes through 2035. So if there is a larger capital need, this is a fund we could tap. Obviously going to want to run the numbers and see what that looks like. Going to have to be able to get a rating unless we're going to do a private placement. And so again, this could be an option. I would say GO bonds would be a better option, but does require a vote. This would be a good secondary option to fund any large capital projects that might be coming down the line.
Since we're kind of in this area, you mentioned using PEPEL to fund Save technology costs. What did you see went on there that we have to use PEPEL to fund Save technology costs?
So Save is next.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Leading
Just got
questions.
the slides this afternoon,
Yes.
so.
Yes. No, I know they came late. So Save is going to be short to pay its debt service. And so Save is going to need an interfund loan to make its principal and interest payments on June 1st. And because it won't have the funds available to pay all of that back by the end of the next fiscal year, there will be multiple interfund loans, and so we'll talk through that in the Save fund. But yes, there's no money available, debt service, and then paying back the funds that need to be borrowed this year are going to take 2 fiscal years to work out and Save. And so that moving technology to PEPEL is one way to protect the Save fund and keep positive cash, even though it won't be much. So, but yeah, we'll talk about, and then the PEPEL cash flow, when you get home and can blow it up and look at it, I wanted to provide all of my cash flows in the analysis for your information. And SAVE is next, so we can talk about SAVE. It's a good segue. SAVE, obviously, statewide funding per pupil is a really important factor in here. To be conservative, PFM assumes zero growth in that statewide funding. There is chatter that the state might be looking to grab a hold of some of that dollars, so the more conservative we can be, the better. This is based on your certified enrollment. I think we have some projections for declining enrollment. I don't remember, I didn't write what I have in here, but I wanted to at least mention it. So we are assuming 20, so I think this is from the most recent demographer's report we put in, I would say overall another 300 student loss for certified enrollment over the next 5 years. So we've got the demographer's report information here that shows modestly slowing, declining enrollment. Right now, 19.87 million in revenue each year, so that's a very large number. But I would point out your debt service is 14.23 million of that $19 million number. So really the cash flow after debt service in fiscal 26 is $6 million. And in fiscal 26, there's 17.6 million encumbered capital expenses. So I think what happened is SAVE got overspent in capital projects. And so it took all of the cash balance and it took money that should have been, I would say, be put in a sinking fund for debt service payments. And now there is $7,320 of funding needed through an interfund loan before, May 15th or May 22nd, whenever we can close an interim financing that we're recommending that SAVE would do an interfund loan borrowing from general fund. And that will take 2 years to pay back for the SAVE to be able to pay it back. And if we want to flip to the next slide, it's complicated because those interfund loans are required to be paid back by October 1st. And because we have spent down all of the cash in SAVE, now we have to live on those monthly distributions, and there is not enough monthly distributions between July 1st and October 1st to make that payment whole. And so, again, we're not at the end of the fiscal year, but based on conservative estimates, again, we're talking about a worst case scenario. We think that SAVE may actually have to borrow from PPEL. 2.5 million is my estimate in order to pay back the and it gets very circular, which is why there's an interfund loan summary at the end. But I estimate that SAVE may have to do an interfund loan from PPEL of 2.5 million to pay back on October 1st the general fund, and then would need to get a new general fund loan that could be paid back by the following October 1st again. And it would take 2 years to work out of that. The last 2.5 million, and then SAVE would have to do another interfund loan from general fund, 2.5 million, to keep cash positive at 1.3 million. You don't want to have zero balance in case something happens. You need a little bit of a surplus and some cash there. And then 2.5 million would be paid back on October 1st with the payments between July 1st and October 1st without a problem that following fiscal year. And so that would, again, be a 2 fiscal year workout to get that the initial interfund loan that is necessary to make principal and interest payments. So any questions on that? And I also want to reiterate, because I'm prioritizing paying back that interfund loan, that means no other capital expenditures. The only thing that is staying in here is the Family Resource Center, of roughly $800,000 per year, but the priority is to get out of the internal fund, the interfund loans as fast as possible, and so that's why moving the technology funds to PPEL helps SAVE recover faster.
What is the Family Resource Center? I think that's from Superintendent Degner. In
Yeah.
case I get questions, since it's 812,000.
Yeah, we pay a portion of our family and student advocate salary out of that fund, so that'll be probably an ongoing conversation we'd want to have about if we'd want to continue to pay for that resource out of there, if that's some cost we'd want to shift to the general fund. Of course, that would have some impacts then to the general fund if we were going to continue that cost out of there. I think, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but I think your guidance is that we should make that move.
Yes. And so if we go to the next slide, Beth, thank you. Again, consider separate bank accounts or whatever needs to be to keep it clear which funds have which cash available. And then for SAVE, my minimum cash balance recommendation, I would love to say 10 million, but I don't think that that's realistic. And so when I looked at, what I could realistically say as a minimum cash balance target, I would say 6.5 million is the number I got to. Again, thinking about a sinking fund, 1/6 of your next interest payment, 1/12 of your next principal payment would be 1.2 million. And then I thought about, okay, your average cash flow after debt service is roughly 5 million. So having 1 year of cash flow after debt service on hand seemed reasonable to me. And so, again, keeping strong June 30th cash balances would allow the district, once the SAVE fund is recovered in fiscal '28, there will be cash flow available for other capital projects, right? Not a lot. $5 million is the number I want in everybody's head, and if technology needs to come out of that $5 million, 3.5 million, that means 1.5 million is what's left. And so I would say prioritizing building some cash reserves and SAVE should be the first priority. Then once we hit 6.5 million, then we have cash that we can spend on an annual cash flow basis. But it is somewhat limited.
As of right now, when would we be projected to hit 6.5 million?
It will be not until 2031. And that's assuming you pay the Family Resource Center and technology out of PPEL. Or I'm sorry, out of SAVE. Now, again, I'm being very conservative. There's no growth in the statewide average, and we're assuming you're going to lose another 300 students in the next 5 years. But it is a very, and to the next slide, if we can, yeah, thank you, Beth. Thank you for keeping up with me as I go back and forth. Go back one more. And so capacity, right? The district is, I would just say, fully leveraged the SAVE funds. The district has borrowed through 2039 to fund the last master facility plan that PFM was a part of. And so debt service coverage legally has to be at 1.25 times, and you are right now right around 1.35 times coverage. So you're fully leveraged. There's no extra dollars that we could borrow against here. And that's why cash flow after debt service is that $5 million number, right? And so if we're using 4 point whatever million of it, it's going to take a long time to build cash, to your point. And so capacity and SAVE is going to be dependent on actual enrollment. If you grow in enrollment, it will be better. And if the statewide average goes up, then it will be better. But we don't know what could happen at the legislature for statewide penny.
I just want to point out that out of the 3 property tax bills that are pending in the legislature, all of them are scooping, they all scoop some of SAVE. So SAVE is, I wouldn't plan on that being your cash cow, okay?
Or growing.
Or growing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a very safe assumption.
Yeah. So, and then there's the cash flow on the following slide, so everybody can see. I sometimes my cash flows look like Easter with all of the colors up there, but I've tried to color code the internal loans, where they're from, where they're going to, when they're borrowed, coming in positive, when they're being repaid. We're assuming SAVE is going to pay interest, right? Because it's borrowing, and there's a cost associated with that. So we're assuming a 6% interest rate for all the internal loans and all the internal borrowings. And then there's the estimated worst case scenario of 17.7 million coming out of SAVE dollars, with an ending June 30th, 26 cash balance of $2 million and a projected 2027 ending cash balance of 1.3. So if that were to be better, we may or may not need the internal loan from PPEL. That's why it's as needed. It's listed as needed. But obviously we'll be keeping an eye on that, and keeping our regular check-ins with district staff to see where we land. So any other questions on SAVE? All right, so now we'll talk about the general fund. And so for the general fund, I'm going to talk about the annual cash flow first before I get into the monthly. Revenues for fiscal 26, 219 million. And of that, state aid and property taxes are obviously the 2 largest components of that revenue. For expenditures, 225 million of expenditures. I think everybody can do that simple math. In the 26 general fund, the largest expense by far is salaries and benefits, right? Payroll expenses that come out of the general fund, 188.7 million of the 225 is related specifically to salaries and benefits. There was an internal loan from the insurance fund to the general fund, which I know everybody is aware of. And so the cash flow does assume that that will get paid back with the warrant proceeds. And then we are also assuming in the cash flow that the general fund will issue a new intra-fund loan to SAVE for that $7,320,000 to make the June 1st principal and interest payments on the SAVE revenue debt that is outstanding. Without a new warrant, without any borrowing, PFM estimates that June 30th, 2026 general fund cash balance would be $4,376,000, which is only 7 days of operating cash. 7 days of operating cash will not allow you to make payroll in July, obviously. So that is where we're recommending that the district issue tax anticipation warrants. If we go to the next slide, when we look at fiscal 27, PFM is estimating 224.3 million in revenues. That's assuming a 2% growth in state aid, and then we know the property tax. We know the valuation, the taxable valuation for fiscal 27 already. So I think it's a 4% growth in your taxable valuation and property taxes. Expenditures, 222 million. We right-sized the budget, I would say, for fiscal 27, in holding salaries and benefits at 188 million. In fiscal 27, for interfund loans, general fund will receive the repayment of the SAVE interfund loan no later than October 1st of $7,759,200. That's 6% interest on the loan that SAVE was given. And then I anticipate that SAVE will then need a second interfund loan back. I say no later than May 15th, depending on cash flow in the SAVE fund. I'm hoping that SAVE will have enough cash to make the December interest payments, and we can wait until May, until the principal and interest is due in May, but we'll have to wait and see how cash flow goes in that fiscal year. But could be November, could be May for a new interfund loan. It estimated June 30th of 2027 without a warrant, without any new borrowing. PFM estimates the cash balance would be 9.95 million. So, 16 days of operating cash on hand, but that is still not sufficient to cover what is estimated to be July 2027 payroll expenses of $11.7 million. And so obviously our recommendation is that you would issue a warrant in 26. And then also, we'll get to that in a second. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. And so the next slide is what I've created for a general fund cash flow. So you can see these do include the warrant. So I'm assuming $25 million is the warrant that would be issued. We'd start the process tomorrow if we're all in agreement here tonight. And then that would have to be repaid before the end of the next fiscal year, and then there would have to be a new warrant issued because you wouldn't have sufficient funds in 1 year to pay all of that back. There would be a second borrowing. Once the 25 million is paid back, then the district could then borrow another 27 warrant, and I'm estimating that right now to be 10 million. Again, obviously that will be very dependent on how things progress and what the cash balances are and what the monthly cash flows look like. The 10 million would also then fund that 2.5 million that SAVE would need again. So it's these warrants that are going to be funding the SAVE interfund loans until we've worked that out. The good news is that this looked much different before we got the governor signed the SSA that now says state aid is paid quarterly, and it will be coming hopefully in July. I'm assuming August 1 because, again, until the check is in hand, payroll is probably going to have to be cut before that check would be in hand. And there is provisions that Beth pointed out as your attorney that say if the state doesn't have money, they don't have to pay you. And so we know for a fact that the state has said they have $1 billion shortfall this year, but they have rainy day funds they'll be pulling to fund that gap. But should there be something that happens, we want to make sure we can at least make payroll. And so again, it will depend, but this looks a lot better, and I'm in it. And this is a 2-year workout plan that looks a lot better than maybe some numbers that we had talked about earlier. So I feel very good about the 25 million.
Is there, I know it's impossible to predict accurately, what's the sense of this quarterly payment schedule continuing beyond, say, this year?
I think it's how they're going to pay them from now on.
But, I mean, so it changed this year, is there, I mean, so I think, okay, maybe it could just change back next year for some
Well,
reason.
they always include language that said, given the condition of the state. I mean, we all know back in the 80s farm crisis, they didn't pay state aid.
Yeah.
And we also know that they're supposed to set allowable growth by what, March 1st of the year? And they never do that.
Right.
So I think this is more fiscal. The Department of Revenue has made some changes that are positive, and I think this is one of them. I mean, really, paying state aid over 10 months didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Quarterly in advance makes probably a lot more sense for them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and, you know, to your point, who knows? I feel like there's a lot of who knows at the Capitol sometimes. So if they get property tax reform done this year, maybe this all gets quiet. But but anyway, yeah, who knows? Okay, so any other questions on the annual general fund cash flow before I go to the monthly general fund cash flow? Because, you know, looking at the fiscal year as a whole is one thing, but we also need to look at monthly cash flows, right? Because property taxes come in big buckets in October, big buckets in April, September, and March are tough months. And it used to be no state aid in July and August again, which is why getting that, in my cash flows, like you're gonna see it, I'm showing it on August 1st because I have zero trust sometimes, very low level of trust. And again, worst case scenario, right? We're talking about a worst case scenario. And we want to make sure that you're in a position to be able to make payroll. And so when I looked at what the monthly cash flows, again, I looked at it before we added any borrowing, any warrant borrowing. The July 26 ending cash balance was negative $6.5 million after payroll with no borrowing. Obviously, you know, that's not what we're recommending. And September and March continue to also have negative cash balances. But as you get towards the end of the fiscal year, things get better as all of your revenues come in over time. Again, the ending June 30th, 2027 cash balance of 9.9 million, whether it's monthly or annually, it's the same cash at the end of the day, wouldn't be sufficient for the July 27 or the July 28, the next July's payroll. And so we're trying to stop that cycle of, do we even have enough money for July when we get to the end of June 30th? And so, you know, and for your information, I provided monthly cash flows for fiscal 26. I would say everything in blue is year-to-date, right, through March. We had year-to-date through March. And then anything off to the right in red for fiscal 26 is an estimate. I've given you fiscal 27 and fiscal 28 to take a look at. In the monthly cash flows, anything in yellow are those interfund loans coming in and out. And the highlighted green in the bottom right is the estimated ending cash balance. And so by issuing a $25 million warrant, instead of ending the year at $4 million, you'll end fiscal 26 with $29.37 million. And that's after the repayment of the insurance interfund loan, after issuing the new interfund loan to save, and all of the different things that need to happen. And so, again, this is all predicated on the yellow red number in the upper left-hand corner that says you have 19.3 million starting July 1st of 25. I would say hopefully in the next 12 months we'll know a lot more about those numbers, and I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here to help. So any questions on the general fund cash flows? And Beth, if you want to go to slide number 24 where they're taking a look. And again, recommendations for a minimum cash balance. 30 days cash on hand seems reasonable, right? If you want to have 1 month of your average payroll plus some cushion is kind of what that turns out to be. Your average payroll, if I go through the whole year for fiscal 27, I think this is based off, would be 15.67 million. And then you want some buffer because it's not just payroll that you pay every month. And so, and overall, 30 days cash on hand is roughly, I round up, because I'm conservative, $21 million. That should give you peace of mind that if you're 21 million or over, that you can make payroll in July, you can, fund any average month payroll and be able to weather those ups and downs as you expend money before those large property tax payments are received in October and in April. I don't know if there's any questions on that. And then, so this is another important consideration when you look at fiscal 27 and then fiscal 28, the information I've given you, and then the annual pro forma goes out, I think even one more year. I am assuming that general fund expenditures are only growing at 2%. And growing at 2% when you may have wages that are more than 2% means there may need to be additional cuts. And I know that that's not fun to talk about, but if we can't stay within that 2% overall expenditure growth rate, then we'll either need to make additional cuts or we'll need to continue the warrant borrowing longer than the 2 years that we have included in here. So hard decisions to make, but that's kind of the reality that we're in right now.
So the 2% would require SSA to be 2% and enrollment to be stagnant, right?
I am
Or is
assuming
that-
I am assuming 2% SSA, and I'm assuming I think I have every other year valuation growth for property taxes. So I am assuming you're getting 2% growth in your state aid revenues, and I'm assuming you're getting, I think, 2% growth in even years and 4% growth in odd years for property taxes.
Where does enrollment fit in there, or does it?
I'm just using a 2% for
Okay,
blanket. Yeah.
thank you.
Yep, doesn't fit in my estimate. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the warrants. I've already mentioned that $25 million is the amount that PFM is recommending that the district borrows in tax anticipation. There'll be taxable general fund tax anticipation warrants. Start the process as soon as possible. This would allow the district to repay the $10 million interfund loan plus interest. It would fund that interfund loan in $7,320,000 to save to make the June 1st, 2026 principal and interest payments, and will provide that buffer of cash you need in the general fund to sort of make it through to give you cash for liquidity purposes to mitigate those monthly ups and downs of how the revenue stream comes into the general fund. Because this is taxable money, you can invest this cash without any restrictions. If you were to get bond proceeds, it would be restricted. Tax exempt money would be restricted, but this is taxable funds. So invest, and capitalize on investment earnings. And that's one thing I will say, the difference between the monthly cash flows and the annual cash flows, you'll notice that cash balances are different because I have included investment income in the annual cash flow that is not included in the monthly cash flow, because it's hard to know month to month on how that's going to commence. So, but investment earnings will also help pay for the cost of interest you're paying on the bonds and the cost of issuance. It'll help mitigate the actual cost of borrowing for the warrants.
How much do you believe investment, or in your model, how much do you have for investment?
I want to say I'm using a 4% investment rate to be conservative. And so that turns out to be, with the $29 million cash balance, $1.1 million in fiscal 27 for investment earnings, which obviously, I'm on, go before slide 23 and one back. No, the one you had it, yeah, that right there. Yeah, so it's the pink in the upper right-hand corner under revenues, it's that pink line. As that cash balance diminishes and as we try to work our way out of having the warrants, right, the investment earnings will diminish a little bit, but that $1 million really helps pay for the cost of the interest and the cost of issuing the debt. And if you can get more than 4%, you might be able to. But I also didn't know how much that cash would be available to invest. I don't know what you get in your sweep account.
I was just going to add as a companion that memo that's also attached to the agenda item tonight. Kurt broke out kind of projected interest expense and then projected investment revenue. And so you can see that in a little different visual in that too for the 2 fiscal years.
Can I ask what our all-in expense is for all of the movement of the money? you know, factoring in the interest and the origination fees, do we have a total for that?
So again, on the memo there, we talk about the total borrowing to cost to the district would be approximately the $2.3 million. You can see where some of that's offset because some of that revenue that's generated from interest, for example, the interfund loan, that's paying those interest monies to the health insurance fund. So the cost to the bank is the 2.3, and then the revenue generated from interest or from investment earnings that we have listed there is roughly at about $2 million over the 2 fiscal years.
And I would
Of course,
also.
we want to verify those
Yeah.
with Suzanne again, but.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is that there will be also income. There'll be another, I'm doing math in my brain, 420,000 that SAVE will pay in interest, right? So that will offset the cost of borrowing. SAVE will pay its portion of the borrowing costs in that regard. And then SAVE will also pay PPEL to help mitigate that. And slide 26. Thank you. Okay, and then warrants must be repaid by the end of the next fiscal year. So the 2026 warrants will just say mature. I put June 30th, but we'll probably put a June 1st maturity date on the warrants for that. And then, as I mentioned, I estimate it'll take at least 2 fiscal years to work our way out of needing to borrow another one, assuming everything goes according to plan. So, and then on the next slide, I assume that there will be a second warrant issued in June of 27 before the end of the fiscal year that would be due June of 28. Much less, hoping that things will go according to plan for fiscal 27 and that we can pay back 15 million, right? So you pay back all 25 and then you only borrow 10, right? So you're not technically borrowing 35 million, you're borrowing 25, paying back 25, and then you're borrowing 10 back. And that would fund the July payroll, and that would also fund the interfund loan to SAVE, the 2.5 million that I think SAVE is going to need, because I don't think SAVE will have enough cash to not need funds in fiscal 28. Let me see. And again, yeah, budget's no more than 2% per year. So if something doesn't go according to budget, if expenditures are more, if state aid is less, if any of the revenues are less, then obviously we would need to revise that number, and we'll work with the district along the way to make sure that we have the right number. We'll know by March of next year where we're going to be for the next fiscal year. So, and then any questions before I go on to issuance process? Okay. So tonight, I'm looking for the board to direct me to release a terms of offering to banks. That I will draft the terms of offering that will include the different terms, the specific terms of the loan that we're seeking, some background information about why we're seeking the loan, some just general credit information about the district. I will be distributing it to at least 3 different banks that I think would be good lenders, including the local bank that you bank with. Your banking institution has indicated they are interested. And then we're estimating, I don't have the firm timeline quite done yet because I need to talk to the banks that received the terms of offering, and I didn't want to let the cat out of the bag until we talk tonight. So I will be making those phone calls tomorrow. But I will say proposals will be received no later than April 22nd. And then PFM will determine the winning bidder based on the proposals received. I will be looking at all of the terms. I'm going to create a terms of offering that allows our banks to propose the best possible deal for the district. I'm going to give them some flexibility, and then we're going to talk to the attorneys to see where we can be flexible and where we can't. My job is to get you the lowest cost overall for the loan, and I think that the banks that I have in mind are going to do that. The next step, after I receive the proposals, I determine the winning bidder. I'm going to make a recommendation to you on which bank I think you should select. And then the next day after, I would ask that we hold a special meeting where you would award the warrant to the winning proposer. It would be a very short meeting. I think we're allowed to do that like via Zoom or something.
You do
We
it
don't have to.
electronically in
Yeah.
10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, max, yeah. And then we'll know the total cost, we'll know the interest rate, we'll know all of the different details. And then once you have awarded, then at your regular meeting, the first meeting in May, we will come back, the attorneys will prepare the issuance documents for everything that needs to be authorized by the board for issuance proceedings, and then we would close no later than May 22nd, which will, I'm targeting May 21st so that we can distribute the funds on the 22nd, but no later than May 22nd. And then again, those warrants would need to be repaid no later than June 30th of 2027. And the next slide gives you the dates specifically that I'm targeting. So April 1st, we're here today. If the board approves of this approach, I will release the terms of offering to the banks tomorrow. I will have conversations about how fast they can get through their credit process and how fast they can get us a bid back. I'm going to ask for the 17th. I've been given leeway by our attorneys till the 22nd if necessary. And then as soon as they give me feedback, I will alert the district staff, and we will schedule a special meeting that works for everybody, hopefully to be held the day after those proposals are due. Then May 12th, you will authorize issuance proceedings. Since we're taking action that night, Allers and I have talked, and we thought it best to just authorize all the internal loans, interfund loans that need to be done as part of this. We thought that would be the right time to just handle that business as well, do that on May 12th. And then once we close on May 21st, which is my goal, is to close on that 21st, and on the 22nd, the funds go out the door. Technically, they could go out the door the day you close, but always want to be conservative and assume the day after. And that will put the money in the funds before the debt service needs to be pulled by your paying agent to pay bondholders. So I know this is a lot, so thanks for hanging in there. Any questions?
This is, as you said, quite a bit of information to try to absorb and to act on right now. But I think we can do that. Can you make any comments about this overall plan? To me, would necessitate a good deal of work and dedication, commitment on the part of staff to to follow the elements day to day, transaction by transaction. Mm-hmm. And can you make any comments about if we are involved in now in correcting financial mistakes that were made over the last 3 years or so, something like that? Can you are you going to make some kind of statement to us about what happened in the past that we just need to make sure we've corrected, so we're not continuing those errors into the present and future?
Yeah, I can certainly address that. I think that we've had conversations internally with staff. I would say that I think part of it was maybe a misunderstanding on some finance staff of property taxes being property taxes and not debt service property taxes, PPEL property taxes, SAVE taxes. They were in one bank account, so I think there was a misunderstanding that those funds were all available and there's different rules associated with different buckets of money. When you levy a tax for debt service, it can only be used for debt service. When you levy a tax for PPEL, it should only be used for PPEL. I think there was misunderstanding. That's all I can sort of speak to on that. I would say that I think there's been some overspending. I think that especially I'm very concerned about the SAVE fund. I think there was overspending there. So I would say there probably needs to be conversations about the internal controls, and that'll be some of my closing comments in the next section, where I think there needs to be some hard conversations about how you handle pay requests and different things and how things are scheduled. It was a little alarming to me personally that there was a capital plan that your financial advisor had no knowledge of. That was a little alarming to me. I didn't know. I had reached out to former staff and they said, nope, didn't need PFM's help. We got it. Thanks. We're not borrowing, so we've got it figured out. I offered my help. I'm on retainer with the district. There was never a call. So
Are you talking about the FMP 2.3?
Yes.
Capital plan?
Yes.
No one reached out to
No.
you for help?
No.
Or to help figure it out?
No.
This kind of question goes kind of with that, since you commented earlier that we are bonded out already to 2039 and save, would you recommend us bonding out any further at this point?
Not in save, no,
Not in save?
no.
Not until after 2031, or what are you thinking?
Again, GO would be the option, PEPL could be the option, save is really not an option. There's not even capacity to do interest only, so save is not really an option until we're much closer to 2038. I mean, you're fully leveraged, so it's not even, I mean, interest only, you couldn't even borrow, I mean, anything that would get you a building,
Thank you.
yeah. So, you know, I did also prepare an interfund loan summary. You know, I think it's important, to your point, we're asking, there's gonna be a lot of moving parts. And so I thought it would be helpful to just lay it all out in one place, the dollar amounts, the to, the from, the dates. This is just me trying to be helpful. So general fund, there's gonna be in fiscal 25-26, there'll be the $10 million that was already received to the general fund from the insurance fund that needs to be repaid plus interest. There will be a new interfund loan from general fund to save. We've talked about all of these already, but this is just me sort of giving you the roadmap to help staff know the dates, the timelines. And then again, general fund last interfund loan out of general fund to save, hopefully in fiscal 26-27 of $2.5 million. Save interfund loans. Save will be receiving that loan. I've also put where it needs to be repaid from, right? So the save loan, the $7,320,000 interfund loan from general fund to save being repaid. I'm estimating 6% interest. We will know the interest rate as soon as we receive proposals. Needs to be repaid no later than October 1st. It will be a combination of save monthly revenues coming in between July and October 1st. It will be a combination of any cash in the save fund that's available and possibly that PPEL internal fund loan. As needed, if needed. For fiscal 26-27, I estimate there will be assuming there is a $2.5 million interfund loan from PPEL to save, rather have it on the list, give out the terms, and then not need it, we can scratch it out later. And then also $2.5 million interfund loan from general fund to save to be repaid with interest based and funded by that 27 warrant. For PPEL, again, the interfund loan that PPEL received an interfund loan from debt service that needs to be repaid. I made a note about the dollars that were put in the PPEL fund, $7.4 million. However, PPEL did make the debt service payment. I don't think debt service is owed that dollar amount, so I have netted out with a little asterisk as to all the details of why that number is less, $4,939,604. That needs to be repaid to debt service from PPEL no later than May 22nd, 2026, and PPEL has cash on hand, I believe, to make that payment, or will at least by the time we get there once the April property taxes are received. And then again, the PPEL, the potential interfund loan from PPEL to save, if that needs to be repaid, that will be money that goes back into the save fund, or PPEL fund from save. And then lastly, other observations and considerations, and this is where I've kind of opined a little bit on some thoughts, some food for thought. You know, our attorneys had some things they asked me to add to this slide. Obviously, as a reminder, interfund loans should be authorized by the school board before any money is moved. So I think everybody is aware of that, but just want to say that number one on the list. Number two on the list for priority for me, general fund capacity for increased payroll and benefits really needs to be, expenses overall needs to be limited. The more you can limit it, the better you're gonna see better financial results, obviously. You know, now is really the time to make some hard decisions. And I know that those things aren't fun. I'm very aware. I'm not going anywhere. I'm happy to be part of hard conversations. You know, I think buildings need to be looked at, in my personal opinion. I think there are some things that can create efficiencies where the students aren't the ones that are gonna pay the price, right? It's not the educators and it's not the students that are gonna pay the price. I think there's some ways to create efficiencies that the community might not love, but that will create a fiscally vibrant school district for years to come. That's just my thoughts. I really want to reiterate that we need to sort of create this understanding district-wide that for the next couple years, we need to really tighten the belt. Like, everybody needs to help. It may seem like something small, but every dollar helps. And so really, you know, understanding the limitation of funding and understanding the limitation for those new projects, for the things that were maybe nice that we got to have in the past, having those hard conversations, going back to the line item budgets, being a little bit more stringent. All of those things will make better results and will get things back on track so much faster. And it's not fun to say no. We kind of joke in finance. I wish that the no buttons were less than $2.99 so I could give everybody a no button. We have to say no, and it's not fun to say no, but we have to say no. We're to the point where we have to, and so and again, prioritizing conserving cash. Where you have cash, hold on to it. Cash is gold right now. Cash is going to see you through. And while there's things that may be nice, is it essential, right? We're to a point where we need to talk about what's essential. And again, not fun, but conserving those cash balances will help you get through the next 2 fiscal years. I think if we get through this next fiscal year, we get to the end of 27, hopefully this looks very different next year when I hopefully come back next year. I hope that we're in a very different position. I think we can be. Lastly, want to address the Moody's rating. I think as you work through, you know, obviously internal control review, you have a new CFO. We're very excited to welcome your new CFO. Beth is very familiar with her and very excited that she's joining your district. She comes highly recommended by your attorney. I don't want to speak for you, Beth, but I haven't got to meet her yet. I'm very excited to meet her.
I've worked with Pat for 25 years, 30 years now. For a long time. She's very good. She's very knowledgeable.
Yeah. So I think that's a great step in the right direction. And again, getting through the fund reconciliations, getting through the completion of the 24-25 audit, getting things caught up that will put us in a position where we're ready to go talk to Moody's and can talk about some new projects maybe. It's going to take probably 18 months, I think, to get caught up on the audit work. And because of the cycle and they want at least 12 months, we might be able to get grace period for 18 months, but that would be a special concession from Moody's, which I'm not opposed to asking for. But again, it's going to be sometime in 28 before the district is fully caught up. And so that seems like a really long way away, but that goes really fast. Yeah. And so those are kind of my
I think one of the other things, it's back on this slide, your capital projects, you really only have PPEL, right? So that's got to take your painting in the summer, the new carpet, the air conditioner that goes out, all those things that you may or may not be planning. That is your sole capital source. You don't have any other money. And that's going to take some belt tightening, right? So I want to just be very clear about that, because you don't have any capacity in SAVE. It just isn't there.
Can you just say briefly, why is that the case? Because my recollection is that when the community was being asked to support FMP 2.0 and subsequent plans, there was a pretty good analysis that said that there was adequate capital funding for those projects.
And there was, but now that's all your capacity. And those bonds for 2.0 don't mature until 2038.
Okay.
And so I think at the time, it was Les and I back then, right? We knew that SAVE was tapped out for a while. It was going to have to be PPEL. It was going to have to be GO if there was anything large coming forward. So I think that we knew that. I don't know how that got communicated, right? And you do have cash flow after debt service, but remember, technology wasn't 3.5 million back then either. Technology, I want to say, was 1.5 when we started that, going to 2, going to 2.5. Now at 3.5 million, technology is becoming more and more costly as well.
Well, that's fine. We're just looking for explanations. Okay.
If you were consulted by administration last June or May or April, would you have told them no to FMP 2.3 likely?
I guess I would have run the numbers.
Yeah.
I would have said no to save dollars, for sure. I would have said no to spending cash balances down to where they are today. We could have leveraged PPEL.
Yeah.
There's things we could have done. I still haven't seen 2.3 in its fullness, so. We would have found a way. It might not have been the right timeline. I'm all about finding a way. The timeline probably would have been very different, though. So that's all that I had prepared. So I'm happy to answer any other questions anyone might have.
With the timeline that you propose, there's no wiggle room, like changing any of that would not get us the funds in time. Is that correct?
Do you mean I need to start talking to the banks soon. If I need to give them a range, I could give them a range. If I don't want to tell them a firm dollar amount, that would, like, if you're thinking of the dollar, I don't know what you mean by changes, but, I think that, yes, in order to get money, to get everything funded, to make June 1st debt service payments, and to close by the end of it. Otherwise, we'd have another month, right? But June 1st moved up our timeline. We thought we had till June 30th. Now we have not till June 30th. So I would say I can give a range if that's the direction of the board, but otherwise we need to start talking to banks. I need to start talking to banks tomorrow to get everything rolling the way.
That end of May timeline, Suzanne, they don't, you have the 21st listed there for closing of warrant proceeds, and then May 22nd. There's no need for an additional meeting at that time. You have highlighted the one special meeting that the
Just
board needs to consider.
yes, that's correct. It's the one special meeting that would be the day after proposals are due, and then it's the regular meeting, the first regular meeting in May, and that's it. Everything else happens by staff.
Additional questions or comments from directors?
Guess I'll go. Okay, I asked that one. When you said finding efficiencies, or if you don't have any suggestions right now, if you want to give us suggestions later, or?
I mean, in my mind, when I look at the demographer's report and the building efficiencies, I think the number of school buildings needs to be looked at. PFM actually has a specialized practice that works with fiscally distressed school districts or districts, just school districts in general nationwide. And one of the first questions they asked me was they were surprised that a school district with your student population had 3 high schools. So there are things, I know those are hard conversations, but I think buildings needs to be part of the equation. And I will say, and this is something I didn't say, so I'm glad you asked this question. If we don't make hard choices about buildings, then we're going to be right back here in another 3 to 5 years, right? Because it's a cycle where obviously personnel are the most costly expense that the district has, but buildings drive the need for personnel, especially non-educational personnel, support staff, administrators, different things. And so, and we were talking, spending more dollars doesn't mean a better quality education. Sometimes spending less dollars means a better quality education. And so anyway, that's where my mind goes immediately is number of schools, the efficiency that, is in your demographer's report for classroom efficiency and all those different things. I think those are the hard decisions that would be my first on the list to investigate. It's not my area of expertise. I can't make those recommendations, but that would be where I would start because that's going to directly impact your payroll.
And when Charlie, if you have a question to go along with that, I'll let you go. 'Cause I have a question on different
Thanks, Mitch. I really hope that we have, or you have, some really convincing data and experiences that says to this and any other school district that stopping use of some buildings is actually going to make our educational program better.
And again, I mean, you know, probably talk about this later, but, you know, my colleagues that do this, you know, we'll see what they have to say. But I'm sure, I mean, I know that the most recent one was from Boston. So these are large school districts across the nation that are dealing with, you know, enrollment decline and have to deal with buildings, and the best, most efficient use of it. But yeah, I'm not the person that would be able to provide that, but I would hope that if there's other,
Well, somebody's gonna have to, so.
yes.
For a district our size that is, has a healthy financial situation, how many elementary schools do they typically have?
Oh, I would have to look. Waukee is similar, I think. I'd have to look. I think they have 13, 2 high schools, 3 middles, and I'd have to look. I want to say 13, but it also depends on the capacity of your elementaries because there's different sizes and capacity.
I looked up Waukee a couple of years ago. I think you're right.
Yeah,
about
that sounds right. And they're not going to need a new one for, I think, another 2, maybe 3 years. Because I would also say we're also seeing changes in the student growth patterns. It's not the kindergarten classes that are growing right now, it's the middle school classes that are growing. And so that's, I don't know if that's statewide, but I know at least in the Des Moines Metro where I do a lot of other schools, it's different. It's different than it used to be. Growth is different. Growth looks different than it used to. But yeah, I would say, and it depends. I mean, obviously they're feeder systems to your high schools. And so the top of the food chain is the most expensive to the least expensive. And so, you know, elementary schools are an easier place to start. But it also depends on the feeders. It's more complicated, right, than just how many elementary schools, unfortunately, that you have because of the boundarying and the feeder systems to the middles and high schools.
And do you have data on how many administrators similar sized districts have that are doing well financially?
I can give you some.
I think a lot of this information is available on the Department of Education's website
Okay,
for all the school districts.
okay.
It's probably part of the CARs, which are available on the Department of Ed. They haven't posted the 24, 25 CARs, but they do have 22, 23, 23, 24 posted.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah.
since we're having a conversation and it's a public meeting where people are listening, I thought I would ask those questions.
I can't tell you off the top of my
Okay.
head.
Yeah, that's fine. We can come back to it another time.
Yeah. And I'm happy to do some research and give you some numbers.
Okay, thank you.
As things were, I gotta wait until you're done writing your
That's
notes,
okay.
so.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
As things were reconciled for FY '24, did that change any of the numbers that you had up there, or do you go back, or are you just more like, we need to wait until we have everything up to date for FY '26 and then go back?
So it's
In
a
F- yeah, sorry, go.
yeah, it's a ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
So we're operating in fiscal '26. So if I have a change from '24, that's going to ripple through '25, and it's gonna. And if we have changes for '24, it's going to reduce my confidence in '25, if that makes sense. So that's going to make me want to be even more conservative for where we are today.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but it'll definitely have a ripple effect.
Then when we have it showed about $2.3 million in borrowing costs. I'm just gonna forget the interest for right now. Where does that come from? Is it out of the general fund? Is that a general fund expenditure, or where's that?
Yes, all of it would be paid for by the general fund.
And since I know this question will come up, this is for the superintendent, how did we get to the point that our Moody's rating was removed?
Yeah, it's the timing of the audits. The board had received an email at the time that rating had been removed. So
Okay.
the ongoing audit issues.
do directors have any concerns regarding the proposed plan?
No concerns?
No, I mean, I think it's been laid out very well. And the timeline, although quick, I think we need to, we need to move quickly. We don't want to ever be in a position where we can't make payroll. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, I'm contemplating the plan, and I think it's been well presented. I assume it has the support of the superintendent and staff. I appreciate, the thoughtfulness and the care that's been put into formulating it. And to me, it has enough flexibility, especially as we gain full knowledge of what our cash balances are. And we have some insights now, I think, about management, more careful management of financial issues on an ongoing basis. I think this is a good recommendation.
I share that view and feel that it's been really well laid out. I think the urgency is clear, and I know I've mentioned this before here, but I want to say it again, and I'll probably say it a whole bunch more times. I just want to make sure that we take these really excellent recommendations for how to ensure that we don't get into similar situations in the future and implement them, and that we, as a board, develop some pretty clear indicators that we're watching very regularly, so that we can all jointly help ensure the success of this outcome.
And your talk about efficiencies and the need for us to do that, I think that's been true for a while. And I think it's, becoming increasingly apparent and more dire, I guess, because this is really truly a crisis. I think we need to look at efficiencies of our buildings. And as you say, it's not going to be popular with our community, but I think we can still deliver a very quality education for our kids. So I think I appreciate your thoughts about efficiencies.
I really appreciate your work on all of this and your clear presentation and the candid responses that you've given to us tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. And, yeah, the plan is the plan, and I support it, though I don't like the way that we got here.
So that sounds like we will be directing you to move on to the next phase, and looking forward to having you as part of the conversation as we move forward and looking at ways to become more efficient and ensuring that we do not end up in this position anytime soon after this. So if there's no other comments or questions, I would move for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you again for joining us.
So welcome.